Hello, hello. I am Rachelle Eason, and I am excited to take you on this journey through air dry clay. So, as many of you know, I am a crazed potter. I have been doing pottery since I was 4 years old, and that's wet clay. Actually, get in the moist clay and hand build or throw on the wheel and sculpt and make beautiful things to eat and drink out of and even cook with and to decorate your home and just things that make you feel joy. That's my goal. And so, as passionate as I am about clay, I do love to teach it. I love to see new students get their hands in that clay and just really understand the therapeutic benefits of it. Besides just the fun of it, I mean, it's just so great to have a tactile type of a medium. But because we are limited with clay making in meaning that you need to have a kiln to fire your clay to completion, there are such wonderful things as air dry clay. And air dry clay, although doesn't do the same as wet clay, it will never vitrify, which means it will not hold water, and it's always going to be porous, so it's never food safe. So I'm gonna be saying that a gazillion times throughout all of my teaching of air dry clay, just so that you know that you cannot put food in this. You can't have food touch the surface of this. Even though it has those limitations, it also has some great amazing qualities to it, and one, of course, being that you can do it anywhere. You don't have to have a kiln to have it finished, to complete it. So we are going to use air dry clay in a variety of ways, and I want to go ahead and share with you just a little bit of prep, and then we're going to go into a project, and then it'll be continued for all of our fun things to come. So let's just go over a few things that I have on the air dry clay supply list. The one main thing, of course, is air dry clay. And this brand, the Das brand, is the brand that I highly recommend over anything else. If they were out of this brand, I would wait until they got more in. It's just the best clay as far as ease of use and the moisture level and the fact that you can wrap it up and it stays moist for the next time. And I've seen and I've used air dry clay in the past that just cracks really easily, and it doesn't have the longevity that this brand does. And so I definitely would use this brand. And then you need a set of tools. And as a potter, of course, I have a gazillion tools, but I can't mix my pottery tools with my air dry clay tools. So this is a set that I keep just for air dry clay, and this set is actually the one that is current to the art supply list that I have given out. So these tools, let's go ahead and use these and look at these tools. And the ones that I like for air dry clay are in this nifty little bag, and you can actually keep this bag for storage, or you can put your pieces in a little cup. I always use a ceramic jar or whatever. But the first thing is this sponge that's so important. So definitely, if you don't get this set, make sure you get a set, or make sure you get sponges. You can order these separately as well. And this sponge is very important. And then we have loop tools. There's a large loop tool, and then this is a double-ended loop tool, as you can see. Let me put that over there to the side. So I've got my loop tools, and then I have a needle tool, and there's a little cover that you'll most likely lose. I know I lose that after the first time that I open my tool set. So there you go. I don't always have the cover. And then this is called a flexible rib. As you can see, it is actually very flexible. And so we'll put that down. And remember, I'm going to tell you and show you what to do with each of these tools later on. Right now, I just want to show you what they are. So this is called a modeling tool, and some people call this a second thumb. this little part up here, this bent part. I call it an elbow. I don't know why. I just have always called it an elbow. It's not an elbow. But anyways, this is a modeling tool. So it has this rounded edge, and then it has a knife edge on the other side. And then we have a smaller modeling tool, and this is one of those desert island tools, I call it, because I love my little small modeling tools. They have this great, these great little rounded edges on both sides, and you can kind of get into little nooks and crannies, and so that's a really important tool to have. This is a wire cutter, and you can use this with air dry clay. This is really more for, well, I mean, I'm not going to say more for wet clay. You can use it for both, but anyways, it's a long wire tool, and what you do with that is just kind of unravel it and put those handles in there. You'll see that this kind of wrapped around a little time, and then it's going to open, and you've got this, this long wire tool, and it cuts clay. Obviously, it's a wire cutter, it cuts clay. And so I'll show you how to use that later on. Again, I have a different knife that I like to use for air dry clay, but it wasn't in this kit, so you may be using that a little bit more. There is a fettling knife in here, and this is actually one of the reasons why I like this kit is because not only did it include the sponge, but it also included this fettling knife, and that's a really important tool as far as little detail cutting and all that. And you can see my finger. You know, don't go slicing your finger or anything, but these aren't really sharp, not too sharp. You can cut yourself, obviously, if you tried, but, you know, don't do that. So, and then this is a little wire brush, and this is great for mark making, and it's also great for scoring, and we're going to talk about scoring, slip and scoring, and so this is a great little tool for that. And then these are little ball stylus is what they are, and they're different sizes. As you can see, there's 4 different sizes of these ball stylus, and these are good for multiple things, not only for smoothing and for indenting, but making some little round spaces, and they're just fun to have, and it's a very simple tool that makes a world of difference when you are creating certain pieces. So those are the main tools in that toolkit that I advised you to get. So again, if you do regular clay as well and you have tools for that, I really recommend you getting a separate set for air dry clay. Yes, you can clean off your tools if you go back to regular clay, but you never know, and you do not want air dry clay to mix with regular clay. That's the biggest thing. It will melt to your kiln, and it will just cause some problems. And so these are relatively inexpensive for a set of these, and so I would just go ahead and purchase that and keep that separate. Again, just don't use it for regular clay. So I'm going to go ahead and put these back in my little pouch. I do have a cup that I'm going to use, and I thought I brought it in this studio, and again, I don't know where I put it. So, and then I don't wrap that back in that circle. I just kind of fold that up, and I'll stick that in there, and then I'm going to put that to the side. Okay, so those 2 things are what you need to get started. You don't need anything else. As you can see, I do have a plastic mat on my desk, and so that is important as far as keeping your area clean, but it peels off of your tabletop as well. So, you know, if you don't want to use a mat, then you want to live on the wild side, you can, you know, you don't need that. So these are the basic things. Okay. But there's also some other things that are nice to have. They're not necessary, but they're nice to have. One of the things I put on there was an acrylic roller. This one happens to be purple, of course. And I think the link I had was for a clear one. I couldn't find any purples. This one's probably a good 10, 15 years old, if not more. And they're fabulous. They're wonderful for rolling your clay. And you could use a bottle. I have a bottle over here if you want to use a bottle to roll out your clay. But these little rollers, They're, like, again, they're relatively inexpensive, and they're just nice to have. It just makes it a little easier to roll out slabs, and it's not cumbersome like a bottle would be. And then, let's see, the other things that I put on there was a set of these silicone brushes, and these actually came together in one set. And again, I don't mix my tools, my wet clay tools with my air dry tools, so I did order a set for air dry. Most of all my air dry tools I left at I actually was teaching this at Florida Southern College, and I left all those tools there because what was I going to use with air dry clay tools at home, since I have my own pottery studio here? But, you know, little did I know that I was going to add it into my repertoire of teaching online, which is what I did at Florida Southern with those tools. So when we went to hybrid teaching because of COVID, I taught my ceramics 1 and 2 college level classes using air dry clay for the students that were at home. Okay, anyways, I digress. So these silicone brushes come in these fabulous, unique shapes, and the tips are pretty interesting. And, you know, just as we go along and create different pieces, you might find that you like to have that rub with some of these brushes. Interestingly enough, and as much as I use my fingers in wet clay, my hands in wet clay, tools are important because they seem to get a job done without applying too much pressure. And sometimes with your fingers, you apply a lot more pressure than you need. And so sometimes just the touch of a silicone brush helps to seal something, you know, make a seam, stitch, you know, kind of come together and all those kinds of good things. So I do like to have those. This was in the same set, and this is a smaller version. They're relatively nice to use, to hold, and they also have ballpoint stylus at the end. So whereas the big ball ones came in the set, these are smaller stylus points, if you can see that. And these are also nice for indenting and engraving and making little tracks. And so those are fun. And, you know, give me a tool and I can give you a reason as to why they're wonderful, because it's just so fun. But again, these are not necessary. They're nice to have, but they are definitely not necessary. And these came, like I said, I think here's the little pouch that they came in. So it was both of these in one order. So that was a nice little set. Okay. The other thing that's on that list, or actually, I can't remember if I put it on the list or not. I may not have. This is an old blade. And this blade, this is from my polymer clay tools, which I do have here because I do polymer clay here as well. So this is a blade, and you take the safety bar off of the blade side, and then you put it on the other side, like so. And then you have this nice blade to cut your clay and all that. And this is what I really use a good bit with my air dry clay rather than that wire. And I just find it a little easier to maneuver. I honestly can't remember if I put that on the list or not. If I didn't put it on the list, I will go back and put it on. I think I was having a hard time finding an order for just one of these that came in sets. But you know, again, it's something that you don't need. It just makes life a little easier. So I am going to put that. And again, I've had these tools for 10, 15, 20 years. I don't even know. So since I started doing polymer clay in 2005, 2006, maybe even before that. So, you know, a long time. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and put that down in the set. And let me think of what else I had on there. So before I get into the kind of the household stuff, you do need a sealant. So like I said, pieces are not ever going to be vitrified. They're never going to be solid and non-porous. So they will not hold water, and you will not be able to use it for food. But there is a way to seal your piece so that it is a little bit more water resistant. So for example, if you wanted to put a plant, if you wanted to make a planter and you wanted to kind of not vitrify, because it won't ever vitrify, and you wanted to seal the outside of the planter, then you can definitely you can spray a gloss. Now this is not the brand that I recommend. I recommended on the list a Modge Podge spray. This is a Kryolan spray, works the same way, but this is a clear, glossy spray. And I do like the sprays better. I'm just out of my Modge Podge one, so I didn't buy any more of that yet. My students, my college students, I had them use a liquid acrylic to seal things, and it was a different brand. I want to say it was Liquitex. This is Sargent's, and this is actually the one that I had my students use, but I don't think I found a link to this kind. They work very similar. So this is Sargent's acrylic gloss, and it says use as a varnish or medium. And you can definitely use this to brush on as a sealant. If you like brushing things, then obviously go this route. If you like spraying things, go this route. One of the reasons why I like the liquid for air dry clay is because I have more control over where it goes. So if I am doing a little planter, I don't want to put a sealant on the inside of my planter, because those pores in that clay actually help aerate the roots of the plant. So I want to give it kind of as much airflow as possible. And so what I usually do is I would take, let's say this is my planter that I made. Isn't that a pretty cup? Let's say this is my planter that I made. I would just put my liquid gloss, just maybe like the top half or the top 3/4 of that planter, and leave the bottom without any sealant, and also leave the inside without any sealant. And that way I have some air flowing through the pores at the bottom of my pot, and it's getting into my the roots of my plant. And so that's why I like the liquid better, is because with a spray you can't really control that. If you're going to spray it, you're going to spray the whole thing probably. Everything tastes better in a handmade mug. I love it. Had to put that little pitch in, right? Go to RachelleEason.com and you can have a mug for yourself. How about that? Okay. So those were the sealants. I said two little containers for slip and for water. I am vegan, and so I eat a lot of vegan yogurt, and so I love these little short, squatty little cups. Right now they both have water in them, and I'm going to show you how to make some slip, but you really don't need anything bigger than these. And I don't use a lid of any kind. So you may want to think that you have to cover your slip so it stays moist, but you don't want to do that because then it can get moldy. So I don't use covers on either one of those, and I just let it dry out, and then you just add more water and it liquefies again, and it's absolutely wonderful. And you will need a freezer bag. This is an old freezer bag. I just keep reusing it, and it's just for storing open packages of clay. So just an old freezer bag is fine. And then I have two old rags, and one is, you can see how really old they are, obviously. One is wet right now, and then one is fairly dry. So I like these to have in my space right here. I don't have, when I'm filming especially, I'm not near my art sink, so at least I have a wet cloth. But the other thing is that when I wrap up my air dry clay, I like to put wrap it in the opening part in a wet towel before I put it back in my bag, and that just kind of keeps it a little bit more moist as well. So that's what those things are for. And then in our purposes, one of the purposes that we're going to be doing air dry clay is actually adding them to our art journals. So you'll need a way to glue your pieces in your art journals, and one of the ways that I had suggested is Gorilla Glue, and I like the gel. And I use Gorilla Glue quite a lot because it works with ceramics too. And so this is I like the gel because I feel like it's less chance for me to glue my fingers together. But this is the strongest. So if you really had some big hefty things and you wanted to glue them together, this would be the best thing to go. You can use hot glue. So it depends on the pages of the book that you want to glue them in. And hot glue sometimes will burn your papers. I don't know if you've seen that before. So hot glue is great. But again, be careful of the surface that you're gluing to. And hot glue can sometimes also just peel right off of your air dry clay. So you can just, you can kind of test that out and see. The other is a PVA glue. And this doesn't even say PVA, but this is basically what it is. PVA glue is very much just like a flat glue, a white glue. And this is this is called Yes Glue. It's acid free. And it's a paste. I don't even know. Yeah, okay, so you can see. Let me put it on the overhead. You can see I've used a lot, and I just use a spatula or something to get it out, and it's basically like white glue in a jar, but it's thicker, and it's really nice to use. And so this is my glue of choice, and I buy these little jars. And again, I don't think I have that on the supply list. So I will go ahead and add a link to that because I like that for everything, honestly. Okay. And that might be all in the supplies. I think that might be all in the supplies. So the next step is let's get into our goodies. Okay, so it is time. Oops. Okay, so the next step is let's get our hands into it all. Woohoo! Okay, so let me go ahead and put me back up in that corner and let's dive in. So I'm going to open my clay here. And air dry clay is water-based. So even after it dries, you can actually wet it down again. And it's not as easy, but you can definitely do that. So you want to make sure that you're using a nice, large enough space that you don't have to worry about getting things messed up, but also understand that it's water cleanup. So, so that's a nice thing. Okay, so I just snipped off that top, and I'm going to snip down a little notch there and just kind of rip it off. And so you have this nice loaf of clay, and I'm not going to get it all out. You don't need to get it all out. We're just going to be using a little bit at a time. You can see how nice and white that is. If you were going to use your wire tool, the way that the wire tool works, the easiest way for the wire tool to work for air dry clay is just to slide, let me get this untangled here. It's just to slide this wire right under your package here like I just did, and then you just put your wire, gather your wire together, and then just pull straight up, and you have a wedge of clay off there. Now, I told you that I like to use this little knife. So if you're going to use one of these little knives, you want to take that safety cover off, and then you can just kind of slice away. Obviously, if I slice down, that safety cover is going to get in the way. So when I'm slicing off my new chunk, and I'll just take it from a chunk here, because this is the easiest way to show you why I like this so much. If I'm going to cut off a little chunk, I'm just going to kind of seesaw it back and forth, and I'm holding the tips or the edges, and I can just kind of seesaw back and forth and go down. And I have a little bit more control over where I'm doing my cutting, which means that I can come in here and just cut these little parts off, and rather than have to get the wire out and cut. And then you can use that other little knife in there as well. But I do like, I don't know, I like that knife. So if you do, be my guest and use that. Okay. So I'm going to use this clay that's out here in front of me for right now. And because I don't want this to harden, I'm going to go ahead and it won't harden that fast, but I like my clay to stay really moist. So I'm going to close it up as much as I can. And I don't need to put my water towel on there yet because I just opened it. It's nice and moist. And so once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and just close that up, put it in my baggie here, and then I'm going to squeeze all the air out of this bag as well, and then just wrap it up and put it over to the side. So there it is. And so now I can just concentrate on what's in front of me. And this part, it doesn't matter how much you have. I'm going to show you how to make slip because that's the very first important thing to do. So one of these cups has water in it. So I didn't measure. So I want to say it's kind of like a finger height of water. If I had to guess, I would be really bad. But it's maybe a little eighth of a cup of water in there. I don't know. It's not much. And I'm going to make slip. And so what slip is like clay glue. And if you get the right slip, it's almost like it's like gold. And you want great slip because it helps to keep your pieces together. You're going to glue pieces together, you're going to smooth pieces together, and slip makes all that happen. So to make slip with wet clay, it's very similar. And you take little pieces of your clay and you just put in your water, and then over time it kind of soaks in and it just becomes a slushy mess. With wet clay, it works best to dry out your clay all the way. With wet air dry clay, that does not work best. So you just take your air dry clay right out of the bag, and I'm just gonna peel little pieces of my clay and put it in my water. And basically you're going to have just about equal amounts of water and clay. So I'm going to use a good bit. I'm going to make a good bit of slip because I'm going to be using slip a good bit throughout my adventures here. And it's kind of like a good sourdough starter, is that once you get it started, you can keep feeding it. But I want to have some really good stuff. So your slip might take overnight or even longer than that to mix with the water and become a really nice slushy mess. So don't think it's going to happen right now. We're going to go ahead and do a project with our clay just to get you started, and we will not be using slip on this first go round because it's not going to be ready. I might come back and add a little fun thing to use slip with so that you can get that experience too after my slip has become wonderful and all kinds of good stuff. So you can see I'm just adding these little pieces in, and I'm just kind of rolling it in my fingers. And even though everything is water-based, I don't wear my rings when I'm doing clay, whether it's air dry clay or regular clay. I lost my diamond from my wedding ring in my wet clay years ago, years and years and years ago, probably 12 years ago. And this past Christmas, my husband surprised me with an amethyst in the ring setting, which is what I had always wanted anyways. And so he surprised me. But it took 12 years for that to be repaired. So I don't wear my rings. I don't want to lose my amethyst, and I don't want to mess up my rings. So even though like I said it's water based, I just don't do that. Okay, so I'm just piling it up, and I'm going to end up just putting a bunch of clay pieces in here. And if you put too much clay, there's really no such thing because you can just add more water if it dries out too much. So, and if you don't have enough of clay in there, you're basically just going to have water that has a little bit of clay in it, and that's not going to help you. So it's better to have too much clay at this point and have to add water than other way around. And you can just, just start to get the feel of how that clay is in your fingers. It feels kind of a little bit like cookie dough, sugar cookie dough, and don't eat it, but it's a little gummy, and yet it's very smooth. And air dry clay is just a very different, it's a different tactile feeling than wet clay. But I'm such a kinesthetic learner and tactile person that I love any kind of interaction with clay and sand and mud and all kinds of wonderful things like that. Except for snow. Snow's too cold for me. Okay. I love snow to look at, but I don't like to build with it because it's too cold. Okay. So I'm putting more in. And it's important to do these little bits. You don't want to just take this chunk and put it in water. That water would not break down your clay enough to make slip out of it. So just keep using that clay for making little bits. And I like to kind of make mine as flat, like as, you know, I pinch it to pretty flat pieces. And I'm just piling it up in there. And I'm going to pile it up until I'm kind of above the water a little bit. So I have quite a lot of little pieces in here. All right. So as you can see, I used all of the chunk that I had cut off there at first, and this is quite a lot of slip in here. And my fingers, of course, are all white, and that's why I like to have this little white, or this little wet towel over here. So just to keep my fingers clean whenever I want to. It doesn't come all the way off, but I'm gonna keep I mean, it will come all the way off if I really rubbed it, but right now it doesn't matter because I'm going to keep using it. Okay, I'm going to put that over to the side for a minute. Okay, so the other tool that you need to have is this, are these brushes. And I said just old brushes for slip and for water, and truly they're just old brushes. You don't need to buy anything new for that. I like round brushes, flat brushes. It doesn't really matter. I usually have a couple out. I like them to be a little smaller than larger, so I have no idea what sizes these are because they're so old, but they're just, this one says size 3, but that, you know, that's all depending on what brand you have and all that. So this size 3 round brush is really, I wouldn't go with that. But anyways, this is just an old cheap brush that came in like Crayola watercolor set. And then these are just some old brushes. And so I really wouldn't, you know, worry too much about that. As you start to use clay and water, you'll figure out what sizes you like. But for right now, just get some old brushes and just put those there. Okay. So my slip is over to the side and it's just going to chill out for a little bit. I have this nice chunk of clay and, you know, do what you have been wanting to do. Let's just squeeze it up. And you've got that mat, so you might as well go ahead and just kind of roll it out a little bit and just, you know, just knead it, wedge it. Just like you're making some bread dough or cookie dough. And so wedging in wet clay is really, really important because it helps to get the air bubbles out and get your clay, the molecules of your clay, all happy to move around so that when you go to throw on the wheel, you can easily get that clay to kind of do what you want it to do. In air dry clay, you don't have to worry about air bubbles because you're not putting this in a kiln, so it's not going to explode. Air dry clay, you just simply want to make sure that your clay is all pretty much the same moisture level. So if you had some drier areas on the outside of your clay, you know, you want to mix it up and then distribute the moisture level evenly throughout your batch of clay. So, you know, our slip isn't ready, so we can't really do much with slip right now. But one of the things that I have always loved to do is to cover one of my brushes. So it's something that I can't really do easily with wet clay because I can't put a brush in the kiln. So I always like to start my classes out with this simple little technique to cover my brush and make that all decorative. And remember, you can paint these and do some designs on them later on. So there's a variety of ways of doing that, and here I'm already starting. So I'm making this slab. So let me go ahead and I pulled off some of my air dry clay, and I want to say that this is about a golf ball size, maybe a little bit smaller, of clay, and the moisture level is all pretty similar, so it's going to just be in a nice little ball. And I was using my fingers before, which is what I like to do, but I'll go ahead and use a roller. And when I roll, you know, it's a little piece, but I do this thing called wobble, 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 flip and turn, and you're going to hear me say that also a gazillion times. And so I roll it a little bit, then I take my clay and I flip it and I turn it, and then I roll it again, and I flip it and I turn it. So wobble, 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 flip and turn, and that just helps the edges not get all dried out because you're not rolling to the edges, and it also helps you to roll out into kind of a circular way. So if you don't want it to be circular and you want it to be more rectangular, then you're not going to turn it each time. So I've been doing that without saying the wobble, 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 flip and turn, and I've also just kind of flipped and turned in one stage. So it's rolling out to be a little round piece. So I've got a slab here, and I can put a design if I want to on it when it's rolled out like this, but I'm gonna just lay my I'm going to lay my brush on it, and I'm going to stretch out my clay here as I'm rolling my brush. So if you can see, I'm rolling my brush in it, and I'm patting it and kind of smoothing it as I'm doing so. And I'm kind of rolling in a circular way because I have a circle too. So this is just a nice way to get a very even, kind of pinched design onto my brush. And clay shrinks as it dries because the moisture is what dries out of it. And so as the moisture dries out of it, the pores get tighter. They don't close up in air dry clay, but they get tighter. And so you've got this nice little package here. And I like to roll it like that, and then I can smooth my parts where it's overlapping. I can smooth that together. I don't really need slip because my clay, the moisture level of my clay was still pretty wet. And I am kind of just twisting the end of that and squeezing. I want it to be a little bit tight. I don't want, this isn't going to be really tight on my brush at this point, because if it was, when it dried out, it would crack because it would be too small. So you can see that there's movement. I don't know if you can see that there's movement, but if you're doing this, you can feel like there's movement, and there should be some puffy areas and all that. And that's good because that's your give. When your air dry clay dries and shrinks, that's your give. This tip, I'm going to get my water out here because it's getting a little bit cracky and drying, and I do not recommend using a lot of water when you are using air dry clay. Air dry clay and water sounds like they should be friends, but a lot of times it just kind of makes, the water kind of just makes your clay crack, and mine's cracking right here at the end. So, you know, just kind of be careful about using water. It tends to make your clay gummy more than anything. When it does look like it's cracking, you want to massage water into it. So you don't ever want to douse it. If we're doing a bigger piece, I would use a sponge and massage, but right now my fingers are doing the trick. So see, I'm just kind of massaging that water in there. And I'm trying to get a little kind of cutesy little curve going on back here, and I'm smushing it back into the tip because it's breaking a bit. And that's the beauty of clay, is that you just smush it back in and kind of start again. So there's my getting this little curve, my little tip of my brush here. And so when I get that and I like that, I'm going to keep that little curve right there. And I'm going to work on this other part. Not really using the tools right now because there'll be time for me to teach all of you that. I just want you to kind of feel the clay right now and, you know, have some fun with it. Okay, so I've got this kind of cap on my brush, and now I've got this excess. See how it's bigger and it's kind of blousy and all that. So I'm going to tighten that a little bit, but I want to do something fun on there. And even though my slip isn't ready, I can go ahead and because this clay is pretty wet, let me see if I have any slip ready. No. Sometimes the teeny tiny little bits of your slip will be ready pretty quickly, but I don't have anything in there that's gonna be ready. Okay, so I'm gonna roll a coil, and we're gonna talk about all these different things in more detail later on, but a coil is really just a snake. And I just started out, let me do that again. I just grabbed a little bit off of this wedge of clay and making a little ball. you know, in your hands as you roll your clay together like you used to with Play-Doh. So making a little ball, and mine always turn egg shape, pretty much. And then I take that ball or that egg shape and I see it's flattened down. It looks like a bean a little bit right now. And then I'm just rolling on my plastic mat to make a coil. The trick to coil making is making sure that your clay makes full revolutions. You don't want to just do this because then your clay isn't really rolling. So you want to go ahead and extend your hand and your arm and make these have some full revolutions. And so I have this nice little coil, and I'm going to, this is where I would normally use some slip. I don't have any slip ready. So I would, actually, I'll go ahead and show you. I'm going to take this, this wire brush, and I'm going to just make some some kind of wiry mess right there. And that's where I would put the slip. Well, there isn't any slip ready. Even down here at the bottom, there's no slip, right? It's just still water because I've just made it. So I picked up a little piece. This is really just really wet clay. And I'm just going to put that in and pretend like it's slip and smush it in there. And I'm going to get a little bit of smush going on. And then I'm going to take this wire tool and do the tip of my coil and try to find another little nugget. There's just a teeny tiny little nugget, and put some slip on there. And then I will press those together. And that is using slip and clay glue basically. And I'm just going to wrap my coil so that I have a nice little design down there, and I have to end the seal, right? I have to end the tip. So I'm going to put a little bit, mark that up a little bit with my wire tool, and I don't know where I'm going to put it yet. I'm going to play around with it. Oops. I don't have any slip in here. I don't know why I'm looking for it, but there's just some water. There's no slip. Teeny tiny bit. That'll be nice tomorrow. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of wrap that back and attach it to the top of my coil right there, just because that's where it ended up. And take one of my brushes that just for water, and I'm just going to smooth out this coil where it cracked from drying a little bit and from my rolling. And so I have this cute little brush handle, and if I had, like, again, if I had slip that worked, I could add a little medallion. So what I could do is wrap this up and pick it up tomorrow once my slip is ready. But I'm afraid that I may not. Our grandbaby is due any day, so I don't want to take a chance on having to come back, promising that I'm coming back and finishing something when I have no idea when little Miss Willow is going to decide to come out and join us in this world. So I'm just gonna kind of show you right here and go with it. So I'm just forming. You can play around with your clay, and I like to take a little ball of clay and just kind of pinch some petals out in all different directions. And that's how I make my stars too. But this one, I'm going to make a little flower. And so I'm just pinching and squishing and just making this cute little, piece right there. I'm going to make a little center. I'm going to pretend like this is slip. so that you know what to do. So I'm going to scratch out the center of my little flower here. I'm going to scratch out a little part of the center that's going to stick in my flower. If this was slip, that was all this nice slushy stuff that was actually clay slip, then you would put a chunk in there, and then you would put some on there and stick that together, so you have this nice little kind of posy. This is like a little posy that I have here. And then I'm going to put it, I'm going to feature it right here where this overlap at the end of my coil happens. So again, get some clay slip and smush that on there, and then scratch the back of this where I want it to join, and smush some clay slip onto there, and then attach my pieces together. Whoops. And let it dry. It's not going to stick together right away. It has to dry, and it takes a good couple days for air dry clay to dry all the way before you paint it anyways. So what I'm going to do while it's still wet is, this is my brush that goes in the water, and I'm going to just kind of press and make some more designs in my posy with the end of my brush, and if it gets a little dry, I'm just going to wet it. So there's my little posy. Okay, so I stuck the end tip of my brush in there because that's just what I do a lot of times in the center of my little flowers. But I forgot that we have these nice little rounded things. I said we were going to use tools another time, and here I'm getting out some of the tools. Anyways, you can take one of these little rounded stylus and just kind of push. Then you don't have that much of a hole, and you have more of like an indentation in there. And so you've got a little, I'm going to go ahead and smush it down even more. And so I have this cute little brush, and it has this great handle, and then you'll always be able to find your brush that you're going to use for your slip. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and paint that and seal it up later on. Okay, so I have this clay out, and I could wrap it up and put it back in the bag with the other stuff, but you know, that wouldn't be as much fun as using it. So whatever you have left, just gonna roll around in a ball. And actually, yeah, I'm just gonna roll it around in a ball. I was gonna say we were gonna do something where we had to add feet, but again, my slip isn't working. Okay, so I've got this ball, and I'm gonna go ahead and, whoops, roll a nice little slab. I'm not flipping it. Did you see that? Did you catch that I wasn't flipping it? See I've got this kind of design on the back side? That's just because it was so dry. So I'm not going to flip it right now. I'm just turning it. So there's that design. And you can decide how thin you want this. We're just going to make a little kind of trinket dish kind of thing. Very small. I usually like things, oh, how thin? Like not as thin as that flexible rib. That's paper thin. So that's kind of too thin. It's going to crack pretty easily. But okay, so I've got this little slab, and I've got this nice texture on the back. And again, that came because I had some dryness going on, and that was fun. So let's do, in honor of my friend there, Karen, I'm going to go ahead and do a little heart plate. So I'm going to just take my knife, my fettling knife, and just cut a heart. If you have stencils, you can definitely use that, but I highly recommend just freehanding and letting your creativity have a voice. Okay, so I've got that stuff I'm going to put to the side, and you can see that my ends are kind of a little rough, and so I could smooth those with one of my modeling tools, or I could just take a brush of water and just press water, massage water into these ends here, these edges. Like so. And then once there's a good bit of water in there, you can take your finger and just kind of smooth that around. Let me get this up. I really like the tactile part, and I know some people aren't crazy about touching clay. Oops, sorry. The name of the game in clay is touching it. Okay. So I've got that nice little curve. I just happen to have this texture because I had some areas that were dry, and I really like that, so I'm going to go with that. I could flip it over and just use the very smooth side, but I think that's going to be my underside. Okay, and I'm going to just kind of put it back on my table and use some of my tools as a kind of a curve, a flip. Whoops, that one doesn't want to stay. There we go. Let's see what else I have over here. In my other studio, I have sponges that I use to do this with wet clay. So I want to make a little bowl. We use salt in our art journaling with watercolors a lot of times, so this could be like a little salt bowl. Remember, not food safe. I'm not going to be eating anything with that salt. It's just going to be used for art, so that would work. Okay, and then let me see if I can pop open or pop up this part a little bit. Roll it up a little. So I'm just using as many of these tools as I can possibly pull out to kind of hold up my clay so that it dries held up. Let's go that way instead. Since I'm going to make a bowl, at first I wasn't going to make a bowl, I was just going to make a little plate, but I'll make a little bowl. And I need something that is going to let me, let's do it this way. I change my mind all the time, so I have to live with it, right? There, that is. Move that. And now I can lift this end, and then now I can lift, if I move that over, I can now lift this end. And hopefully dry that out, and it's going to be a little bowl. How cute is that? Okay, so then I have, all of these scraps over here, and I could do something else with it, but it is time for me to wrap up. So I'm going to, this is kind of a little dry. Well, yeah, there's a lot in here. Okay, so what I was going to say is that I would just rip it up and put it in my slip. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, because it's getting a little dry. And so I'm just going to put the remainder of what I've got. You could wrap this up, especially in your wet cloth, and then just put it in your bag for next time. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in my slip bucket. I don't like running out of slip, as you can tell. I like to have a lot more slip than I really need, because sometimes, depending on the projects that I do, well, in wet clay, I go through a lot of slip. Okay, so there you go. So I'm going to wipe my fingers. I'm going to be careful not to touch that heart. And then remember I said we didn't need the plastic or the wet towel over it, because I was going to use that wet towel and I didn't know if I was going to get more clay or not. But now that I'm done with this session, I'm going to go ahead and take my wet towel and just wrap it around the end of that bag, that pouch. And then I'm putting that back into my freezer bag. And you can zip it if you want to. Could you see that? I don't even know if I was on camera. I forgot to look and see if I was on camera. So what I did, I took the wet towel and I just wrapped it around the edge of my clay bag. And like I said, you can zip this. Oops, my thing moved. I'm gonna have to fix that. And you can zip it closed if you want to. Your zips work. Your zips don't always work. But you definitely want to squeeze all the air out of it before you do that. And then I usually just fold it over like that, and I let the weight of the clay be on top of the fold. So I'm just going to put that there. And because I messed with my setup here, I'm going to fix that. Okay. So there we go. Yay! So we did 2 cute little sweet projects. The paintbrush is so cute, isn't it? So I have several of these in my other studio that were made with polymer clay, but air dry clay does the same nice thing. And so we're just going to let that dry for a couple days, and then you can go back and paint it. And if we don't have a baby by then, and I can get back on, I'll just go ahead and run through some painting with you. But at this point, I'm gonna let you just experiment, and I will be back in touch with our next project, the art journaling group. I will see you on the first day of our new month of art journaling. See you then. Thanks for watching, and have some fun with your air dry clay.